Good morning. It's great to be here with this illustrious panel, Dr. Venu, Mr. Bose, and Dr. Raman. Before we get into the topic, just a small overview. It's quite well known, the kind of rich, vibrant legacies that the state has in culture. It's equally well known what culture has contributed to Kerala's metamorphosis down the decades. But probably what's more heartening is we also have a huge chunk of population which is extremely receptive to innovations and new ideas in all walks of its cultural life, which is not something that you would see in many parts of this country. But a key point that we need to address is how do we leverage these blessings as we go on to rebuild Kerala? What are the ways, what are the changes, what are the areas of focus that we need to delve on? These are the things which we'll be mainly be discussing at this conversation. At a very base level, if you look at it, Kerala, of course, is looking at a knowledge-based economy for the future, apart from tourism. Now, if you need a knowledge-based economy, you need to attract talent. If you want to attract talent and retain talent, you need to have a culturally vibrant and enlightening space and atmosphere, which alone can make it a distinctive and amenable experience to those who come here from outside. Now, this is at a very base level, but beyond that, there's been a lot of international discussions about creative industries, which roughly consists of everything from dance to drama to music to literature and so on. Now, there's been a lot of attempts at the international level to leverage these cultural industries and make it a part of its economic journey. Maybe to some extent Kerala has also done that, but I don't know, the panel will have to discuss to what extent we have succeeded in doing that. Now, when we talk about that, we need to look at the international experience on that. UK had done a wonderful study in, I believe, 1994. And sorry, 97. And before that, Australia had done something on the same lines in 1994. And even the United Nations had come out with a very voluminous report on that, highlighting how important it is. That was in 2008, if I'm not mistaken. And there's also the growing, I mean, when we say creative industries, I'm sure a lot of artists, including Bose, might say that art is not an industry, but the thing is that we need to look at it from an economic perspective as well. Now, you cannot view creativity as an economic activity in isolation of its social and cultural impacts, which I'm sure everybody agrees with that. But while we do that, we also need to identify what are the components that should go into a policy making, which I'm sure Dr. Raman would explain on that, into a policy making when we look at this aspect. For instance, some of the countries include even things like food and gastronomical, legacies that they have because that's part of the culture. Some even include things like publishing, even software development into this. And there's also a bit of confusion about where do we put culture, where do we put our cultural policy itself. Some say that it should be in the industrial policy, some say it should be in the economic policy, some say it should be in the education policy, and so on. Or some say it should just be in the cultural policy. Now, these are the things which we'll be mainly addressing today. We'll start with Dr. Venu. What are your thoughts on
that? That was a very good introduction. Talking about culture in a land that has just started to recover from a great disaster, we need to understand the role of culture, and I think the topic has been very aptly worded. Does culture count? One of the things that has been asked to me as part of discussions about rebuilding Kerala is that, will this mean that government funding to culture will come down? Does this mean that culture will be accorded less importance? And what is the future of culture in the context of a state that is trying to rebuild itself? So my answer to that is very simple, and you have a very good example, in this wonderful panel here. Immediately after the floods, we had to open the Binale. Now, what people may not understand is that a large part of the funding of the Binale still comes from the government of Kerala. And one of the first things that was done was to reiterate our support, the government support, to the Binale, despite all the hardships we have, despite all the financial problems that the state is facing. And Bose probably will talk more about that. So I would just like to say that culture does count. Culture perhaps has more importance now, because it's not only about government funding cultural events and programs, it's about Malayalis looking at our culture from the perspective of the experiences that the flood has given us, and looking at the future. I see that the cultural fabric of the state, the cultural moorings which we have, the linkages in our society, in our communities, these really played a great role in enabling us to manage the disaster. And looking forward, I think these very values that we have, that we are proud of as part of this land, these very values will play a great role in the whole rebuilding process, because the rebuilding process involves all of us. It's not about building a few houses. It's not about rebuilding lost roads. It is about the state trying to say that we need to do things better, we need to do things differently, for which I think all the cultural values we have, both tangible and intangible, our state is rich in both. All these values are quite important.
And Bose, what can art do to rebuild Kerala?
Many ways we can do it. As Dr. Venu said, it is one thing is, I think, culture is, when I think about culture, it is not about just art world. It comes from, I think, human heritage. How this is, how it is important, the human socio-ecological space given to culture building. When I say culture building, as we are all thinking for a better world, better thinking, better space, that culture can add more taste to it from the ground. I believe in Kerala, when we talk about rebuilding Kerala, it is not just that homes, as Dr. Venu mentioned, It is, I think it is to be understood the ecology of the space, the climate of the place, how we can make it a better world through culture. For that, I would like to, when we look at the policy making, culture is all the time kept behind. In our case, it is, fortunately, we have incredible film festival in Trivandrum, theatre festival in Trichy, now, literature festival in Trivandrum and Calicut, and also the Biennale. These festivals we are just talking about the contemporary festival, but we have incredible culture as it, as performative art, as ritualistic art. In many ways, we have culture. So I think the amalgamation of all kinds of art and culture coming together. I mean, it's very important, according to me. It's not separate from one to the another. As we have to think about the economy when we put together. In our country, even if we have incredible culture, the policy makers, I think in my knowledge, it's 0.2% is only given to the entire culture building or cultural institutions when we look at it. That needs to be changed. We have to take some kind of successful examples, not to follow them, but maybe we can imbibe. For example, UK, every £5, the GDP comes into the country. Out of that, £1 is dedicated to culture building. That you could see it in France, almost 80% of the tourists are cultural tourists. There are studies, reports, when we look at it. That's the economy they've, getting into that space. So I think it is important to look at the economic aspects as well. And also as the Biennale Foundation, we try to do something through making an auction, a small auction, that's the first time a contemporary art auction happened in Kerala. It's also, I was very happy that, there is a kind of interest in the younger generation of people who like to collect. So there was an opportunity for them to invest it. And so that you could see the energy coming from. That's part of, I feel there is a kind of, it comes from within of each and every one. There is a kind of certain kind of confidence slowly building up. For that reason, I think it is more and more cultural festivals, celebrations. We should not be crying in the disaster time. Or as we all came together, I think cultural world can bring solidarity plus energy, confidence. That is an important aspect to build. I think Kerala's rebuilding Kerala.
Just a couple of small things which I'd like Dr. Raman to dwell on. Now, if you look at the past as well as the present now, we have certain examples of how culture has been leveraged very successfully across the globe. Look at US, for instance. Hollywood was actively supported by the US government so that it can spread its influence, its cultural influence all over the world. Look at the Soviet Union, which is no more, of course. When it was there, the kind of depth and spread its publications and its cultural activities had across the globe. Now, these are just two examples, and there are a lot of recent examples as well for that. Plus, there's also another thing which I would like you to explain more. Now, internationally, you have this millions of small and medium industries in the cultural sphere, which are actually becoming the catalysts in this aspect. Now, it's not just an economic activity because the numbers are so huge that they ultimately decide how people are educated, what kind of values are brought into the society, and even how cities are built and how people live. Now in Kerala, what is it that we can do to take us forward in this direction?
Mr. Rajeev, thanks for asking that question. Since you have begun by citing the case of the US, I think I should link my answer to that particular country. And in that context, I have a request. My request is that we have to go for the history of the very US. What really happened in the 1860s until 1890s. You know, the whole process of the reconstruction as part of what is called generating a new wave of citizenship for the American South. You know, the culture activists, artists, they played a critical role. And it was specifically because of their interventions in the late 19th century that the whole project of reconstruction became a big reality. So from there, if you take the historical experiences, I would be tempted to go for some other examples as well. Say, for instance, if you take the case of, say, Bengal famine, for instance. During the Bengal famine, artists like Zainul Abidin and also what is called the Bhattacharya, they all played a very critical role. They made sketches of what is called, it came to be known as Bengal famine series.
Absolutely.
And that became so serious. I mean, when discussing what sort of role that culture activists could play while rebuilding a nation. So for instance, Guernica, I mean, Bose might be able to explain it more. The Picasso's painting, Guernica, actually that narrates the entire history of, or rather the devastated condition of the Spanish Civil War. So, you know, so all those things got celebrated and they gave us very critical signals how best the artists or culture activists could play in rebuilding a nation or rebuilding a state. So coming to the state of Kerala, I would say that the artists can easily play that sort of a role. And I'm sure that they did play when we had this flood. But sometimes it could be an intellectual question whether they also lost an opportunity in making use of that context. You know, so what I'm saying is that artists can easily play a big role in rebuilding Kerala. So we need to think culturally while rebuilding Kerala, because our idea is not to rebuild the Kerala of yesterday. We really want to rebuild a new Kerala, a new age Kerala. And for this, we like to have critical insights from artists and culture activists. Because culture is to be understood separately, you know, in a different manner. It's not about tradition. It's about constructing something new. But that doesn't mean that we need to drop our traditions, you know. So what I'm trying to say is that you take the case of recent examples. I mean, the kind of culture that we have developed in Kerala. We all know that the per capita consumption of Malayalis, it's so high. And that also is one of the reasons why we have been producing so much waste. I mean, you have the per capita consumption very high, and you also have the highest per capita production of waste. And now you struggle how best you could resolve the crisis of what is called crisis emerging from the waste. And in the case of the new houses that we really want to build, of course, Dr. Venu would be able to say much more about that. What sort of technology that we really want to adopt for constructing new houses? Whether we really want to go for luxury sort of houses, or do we have that sort of raw materials available even if you want to construct luxury houses? No, sorry, we don't want to allow that, because first of all, we don't have natural resources like that. Secondly, we don't want to repeat the kind of disasters that we have experienced, as in the case of flood. So we really want to go for a new culture when you want to construct new houses or when you want to construct new roads. Say, for instance, as part of rebuilding Kerala, we are trying to go for design roads. That would require heavy investments and that would require new technology. So we are not going for the traditional sort of road building in Kerala. We are going for a very different design roads. Of course, the per unit cost would be very, very high. But that doesn't matter. That's not the question that we are trying to discuss. We are trying to discuss how best new culture forms could be integrated while we rebuild Kerala. So I think that could be the answer to your question.
Just
Yeah.
a small.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Sorry. I would say that when you talk about culture, like I think we should not forget about technology as culture. I mean, information technology. I think one of the most brilliant thing come from Kerala is also our kids and our incredible talent from our state. This is an experience, an anecdote I would like to say. Experienced it in one of my visit to Ahmedabad. There was a small festival of technological. It's called the Maker Fest, and I found kids age of 14, 15, 16, incredible inventions. Brilliant boys even from Kerala. There was a boy invented something, scanning, brain scanner. But what we see it from that invention, like I feel in every day-to-day life, day-to-day objects, without design and art, nothing exists in this world. Whether this mic or this, everything, human body, everything. Our kids needs to know when we are rebuilding, thinking about rebuilding, from the beginning itself, our kids needs to know the wealth of art and design. I think we don't know how to package it most of the time, but still getting better and better. Hopefully our new generation of young people can get into this knowing about art and design. It's not, when we talk about, we need to add aesthetic to it, whatever we experience it. So how far we can take it further to rebuild Kerala. I would like to take this young people's mind for that. Yeah.
Before we get to Dr. Venu,
Yeah.
I just want to ask you.
This
Now, no?
This could continue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We need to revisit something that I had mentioned when we started off. As a key member of the planning board, do you think we need a policy correction as far as the creative policy is concerned? I'm coming back to that question we raised first. Where do we fix our creative policy? Should it be in the industry policy, economic policy, education policy, culture policy, what? And where does it stand right now?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. And also, in responding to Bose, I think the packaging, of course, Dr. Venu is the key person in packaging the whole thing. So I would also request Venu to respond to that. But that's very important, this packaging. And to begin with, I would even suggest that, look, we need to have what is called a flood museum and also flood memorials, I don't know why we are not seriously thinking about those things. Erecting a flood museum where you can collect, where you can store the kind of stories that people could narrate. Malsatholaligal, avarude stories, adu nammal record cheyyam, adu namukku keep cheyyam, alle adinte photographs, alle adinte sketches. അതൊക്കെ തന്നെയാണ് ഞാൻ നേരത്തെ പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുള്ള സംഭവങ്ങളിൽ നടന്നിട്ടുള്ളത്. ഇപ്പോൾ ഉദാഹരണത്തിന് അമേരിക്കൻ റീകൺസ്ട്രക്ഷൻ്റെ കോൺടെസ്റ്റിലായാലും അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പിന്നെ ഈ ജപ്പാൻ്റെ എക്സാമ്പിൾ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞില്ല. സെക്കൻഡ് വേൾഡ് വാറിന് ശേഷം ജപ്പാൻ കംപ്ലീറ്റ് തകർന്നുപോയി. പക്ഷേ അത് റീബിൽഡ് ചെയ്ത ആ ഒരു പ്രോസസ്സ് അതൊരു കൾച്ചറൽ ക്വസ്റ്റ്യൻ ആയിരുന്നു ബേസിക്കലി. ആസ് രാജീവ് സാid, ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് നോട്ട് ജസ്റ്റ് ആൻ എക്കണോമിക് project. That's a cultural question. I mean, our workers see, let us join together. Workers and owners are separated. That's the Japan lesson in the let us join together and rebuild our nation. Japan in the Logatilla Rashtra and compete in the Rajeev Maredadan. Upon flood in the context of packages, we need to begin with by erecting what I would say a flood museum and also flood memorials. But coming back to your question, Mr. Rajeev, whether it belongs to this or that, I mean, I have a very specific answer to that. The first answer is that, let us not confine ourselves to a very particular sector or a very particular discipline. It's not like that, because it escapes all kinds of disciplines. So you need to have a new idea about it. It's a post-sector sort of an approach. It should be a post-disciplinary approach. When I say post-disciplinary or post-sector approach, that doesn't mean that you're dropping a particular sector. That doesn't mean that you're dropping a particular discipline. You are just integrating the critical values that you can derive from a particular discipline or from a particular sector. If a planning board, I'm the one who look after roads. That is specifically why I said that, look, we are going to build not the traditional roads, but design roads. 1 kilometer സാധാരണ നമ്മൾ കൺസ്ട്രക്ട് ചെയ്ത റോഡിൻ്റെ 3 ഇരട്ടിയാണ് ഒരു ഡിസൈൻ റോഡ് പണിയുമ്പോൾ വേണ്ടത്. അതുകൊണ്ട് അവിടെ റിസോഴ്സ് കൺസ്ട്രെയിൻസ് അല്ല നമ്മൾ നോക്കുന്നത്, കൾച്ചറൽ ക്വാളിറ്റി, നമ്മളെ റെസീലിയൻസ്, അതൊക്കെയാണ് നമ്മൾ നോക്കുന്നത്. അവിടെയാണ് ഈ കൾച്ചർ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന സാധനം വരുന്നത്. സോ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു വരുന്നത്, ആസൂത്രണ ബോർഡ് we are ready to spend as much money as possible for rebuilding Kerala. Of course, Dr. Venu knows this. And also, as part of that, we really want to make sure that the culture activists, artists, have a critical role to play in this process. They should come forward. And we are also ready to go for a very different kind of synergy between the planners and the artists.
And Dr. Venu, what are our challenges, or rather, what are our opportunities and our potentials?
Well, I need to respond to what you asked earlier about industries. You see, globally, and this is different from Mr. Ravi Raman's point, I'd like to respond to that as well. But globally, creative industries has become a very important sector in the economy. You call them cultural industries or creative industries.
Do you have a problem with calling art an industry?
I don't have any problem that, some people may not like it.
And I was going to link that with what Bose said, you see. So I don't think there is any more debate about it, because creative industries is only, let's say, a blanket term for what you can call innovation and creativity, okay, which has an economic value. And so from that point of view, every piece of art which is available to be seen or consumed or sold or purchased is part of a creative industry spectrum. But what I was going to say was that creative industries is a very important part of the whole economic engine in many countries. The point was made. Particularly so about the future. When you talk about rebuilding Kerala, we need to look at the future. And there I think the design, the art potential of the youth of Kerala needs to be harnessed. And it must be said that today the state policy framework has not yet seen this as an important area for investment. You see, we see this as an area of promotion. We might have a few steps taken through different departments. But I think there is enough material to suggest that the state must actually go one step forward and actually invest in projects, in companies, in groups of youngsters who want to enter the creative industries field. And that today I don't think has not been exploited to its potential. That's one aspect which I wanted to say. Coming to your point, Mr. Ravi Raman, I cannot agree with you more. Museums, since I look after museums and I have a background in museums, this is something very close to my heart. As part of rebuilding Kerala, one of the projects which I am spending a lot of time on is to reimagine our museums. not merely from the post-disaster format, but also from the point of view that particularly the youth, we are losing touch because our museums are not doing enough for them. So from a cultural context, I think we need government, because government is the custodian of many museums, needs to totally reinvent the way we have been approaching museums. One of my major tasks is to, actually redesign and represent our museums to particularly to the citizens of the state, particularly the youth. And there we also are looking at new museums. And new museums are not about just featuring some old things in some place. It's about featuring things like fashion and design, and also memories. That's a wonderful point you said. Museums of memories in every community across the world. Museums are spaces where memories, are enshrined, memories are relived, and from these reliving of these memories, new ideas come out. Ideas about our communities, ideas about the future. We don't have such interactive spaces. For us, museums belong to the past. Museums actually are doorways into the future. So what can a flood museum tell us? There are 2 attempts which I know, locally, community-led attempts to build museums based on their experiences of the floods. But adversity is actually something which we need to document, because we learn from that. Every disaster will leave a museum. One of the most haunting museums I have been to is the Kobe Disaster Museum, where thousands of people died. But that museum is about hope. It is not about documenting the problems. It's not about documenting all those calamities. It is about stories of hope, stories of togetherness, and stories of people persevering and emerging stronger.
Bose, we have 2 people here who actually have a crucial role in shaping the government's policies for as culture is concerned. What's your advice to them?
I totally agree with Dr. Venu's position, as how should be the museums to be conceptualized, rebuilt. It should be in the form of hope. That hope, I would like to give you another anecdote. When the Katrina happened in New Orleans, they lost 400 billion or something like that, right? The loss. But they were not, within 1 month. We are talking about culture building. So I would like to bring this as an important aspect. The local musicians, local artists, all of them got together and they started a Biennale called Prospect. That's only one of the Biennales without the city's name was called. There was a curator called Dan Cameron. He set up this biennial because that city devastated with Katrina. After that, there is a kind of celebration with art and culture. So now it is, they're making it as a kind of trinale. Every Biennales turned out to be trinale, but it's an important aspect. This is the same way certain places, cultural projects like Gwangju, for example. Gwangju is in South Korea. This is after so many massacres, so many people been killed, and after the what to say, I'm not getting dictatorship, So it was a kind of people's movement. It was started that Gwangju Biennial. So there are reasons in culture building, cultural movement happen. And to your question, I would suggest that we should introduce, a liberalized way of, as planning, liberalized way of looking at education. Every institution, nowadays, engineers are not the, when we look at the stories of Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs when he started his company, he didn't invite a technocrat or an engineer. He called a designer. He called a designer called Janardhan Naif. So that's the kind of, and you can see it in the differences of taste building, taste making. It is very important, art and design, aesthetic to be developed. How we can develop it through the policy making. We don't have cultural policy. I would say that, you should initiate cultural policy to, we should be a model. I don't say you, we should be a model. This is a policy. We can have a kind of real conversations about this for a longer time, but I would say that cultural policy is very important, and culture is not behind. Culture is the earth, the soul, the climate and weather. Everything is culture. Without culture, there is nothing exists. And tasteful culture, we have to make it. And we have incredible culture, but we package it better. I think, Dr. Venu is in a great position. He could think of, I wanted to suggest, this one more thing, that when you build a public building, whether it is a toilet, whether it is a library, whether it is a bus shelter and museum, we should ask for a competition. We should not compromise on quality. You were saying that, like road building, will be design the roads. I do agree, but, like we should have this policy of course it is people's money, I understand this. The problem is that when we compromise it, the quality will go down. That is what is happening when you call for a tender. That is what is happening in our building industry. So when you think about rebuilding Kerala, please don't compromise on aesthetics and investment. Thank you.
Just a small question to Dr. Venu and Dr. Raman before we get on to the questions from the audience. It's a very hypothetical question. If both of you are given a completely free hand, no ropes, no holds barred, to change things as they are, what are the 3 key areas each of you would be looking at and would like to change? Right from, it could be from the brass tacks, it could be at the policy level, whichever. Which are the 3 key things that you think you'd
I
do?
think I'll ask the
Maybe
planner to go forward.
Basically, as a planner, I would go for some sort of an eco-spatial planning. It's not just spatial planning alone. It's how it is being articulated. That is completely wrong, I would say. You need an eco-spatial planning, wherein eco should reflect both economics as well as ecology. So, you need to have this eco-spatial planning, and the spatial would obviously take into account both place and the spatial relations of people. So that's why I say that I would give emphasis on eco-spatial planning. That's first point.
One.
The second point is that, look, you need to have an idea about what sort of egalitarian state that you really want to reconstruct. Because we have been very specific that we don't want to construct the Kerala of yesterday. Kerala of yesterday or Kerala of the present day is full of inequalities. Full of inequalities. The highest inequality in India is in Kerala, if you take any of these variables. Economically speaking, I can say that the Gini coefficient, which measures inequality, is highest in Kerala, much higher than the national average. So, if you ask me, the second point should obviously be an emphasis on the egalitarian dimensions of rebuilding Kerala. The third dimension, if you ask me, I would say that we need to have an idea about what should be the nature of ethical state that we can construct. We need to have an idea about fairness. We need to have an idea about the fine balance between human habitation and the nature. So I would say that these three aspects, resilience, egalitarianism, and ethicality, should be the critical elements where you could easily find a critical space for artists and culture activists.
Dr. Venu?
Some of what I wanted to mention has already come. So, I mean, the question of resilience and fairness are important to me. But if you ask me this question, and I'm not an officer of the government, then what I would think is that we need to at least treble our investment in the cultural sector, the state government. It's another matter that we are constantly under pressure because of, because our financial situation is not very stable. But even then, I would say that the funding for the cultural sector is minuscule. I would, if given the option and given the money strings, the purse strings, then I would certainly treble it, number one. Number two, I think in Kerala, from the government side, the support that we offer specifically to the younger generation is absolutely missing. We need to have a policy approach, I agree entirely with Bose, which talks about culture in its contemporary context. Culture as it means to the younger generation. We are all people who need to disappear. We need to have people in their 30s and early 40s making cultural policy here. We do not give a space to this huge group of people. And maybe the way they think and the way they perceive culture is very different from what we talk about. So,
we'll get on to the questions. Who wants to ask the question? If you can keep the questions short, sweet, and focused, more people will be able to ask questions, please.
yes.
Yeah, hello. Actually, it's a question to all the three members. I get a feeling that the impetus right here was actually to make art as an industry, and then the government pumps in more money, and the curators are more happy to get more money. But to be honest, I get a feeling that money and true art don't have any kind of correlation, because if you look at it, art has been generated by really poor people who went through a lot. It's the catharsis, the feel you get from an art has nothing to do with money. And again, all respect to Mr. Bose, who did an incredibly great job in creating a binale which actually takes abstract art to the realm of the common masses, and the masses have accepted it. So, no doubt about it. But still, if you look at the money which government pumps in, actually does it help young artists to come up, or is it actually given to established artists to, to get a space there? And would more money actually help in increasing the quality, or actually would it, increase the percentage of slop-shotty artists who actually get away just because they've got a beautiful write-up about the art, which if we ask them, they probably won't even be able to explain what was written on that placard. And two is with respect to rebuilding.
We have to keep the questions short because we don't have much time.
Rebuilding Kerala. If rebuilding is fine, but if you look at it, even an airport, the airport you see is something which you see in Singapore. It's not even an airport which has many, ingredients of art you find in Kerala. And also a heritage building can be demolished by a builder, and new modern, thing could be built up.
I'm sorry, we need to keep the questions short.
And last question to
Dr.
Venu.
No, we cannot have too many questions from one individual. Which one would you like them to answer?
I have a quick answer for this.
Choose one of the questions that you need to be answered.
The quick answer is that I would respectfully disagree. Money needs to go into the hands of the youth. My point was that the youngsters, the youth, are not being supported enough. People who want to pursue art in Kerala find it very difficult. You know why? Because funding lines, as is available in many countries elsewhere, which enable the artist to work his or her way up his area, not because they are supported through some grant somewhere. That kind of grant system is not really available. It is available in very small fits and bursts. Let's talk theatre. In theatre in the state, is in fits and bursts. I work in theatre, so I know. In fits and bursts somewhere. Real regular support to upcoming theatre groups, enough in adequate funding to ensure that they get to perform, very little. You have it in fits and bursts. The academy does one show sometimes, a festival sometimes. That's not enough. I'm saying that put an enabling environment, and I believe that art and artists will flourish. That's my point.
Let's get to the next question, and once again to remind you, please keep it short and sweet. You want to add something, Mr. Bose?
he uh, you were saying that, curators and, they make the decision, right? I mean, it is, when you look at, when I was studying, there was no opportunity to see an original artwork, a contemporary international artwork. And also, many of our contemporary young artists got greater chance, greater confidence. There are galleries, there are people are coming to Kochi and picking up their art. And also they are going into different levels of their practices. It's not just about the history of contemporary art we are bringing into the Biennale. Okay, so I would like you to, of course, it turned out to be People's Biennial and things like that. I can give you hundreds of examples, hundreds of narrative stories, anecdotes. When you, this is not the opportunity.
There are other questions.
Let's get to the next question, please. Please keep it short.
My question is to Dr. Venu, sir. Sir, we must have a strong will or God's will or sound state of mind when we try to build something. Suppose after a flood, Kerala needs a lot of thing in this side. So why do we compromise when we build a new thing? That is, there we lose this kind of sound state of mind or God's will. Nothing will exist. When we lose this kind of strong will or God's will, nothing will exist if we try to rebuild it. So why do we lose such kind of culture? In the case of road or in the case of building anything, when we try to build, we compromise to many things.
We have to get to the question,
why will
please.
Happen this?
We can discuss this further. We have a shortage of time, but I think in essence it is about government processes which emphasize quantity over quality. It's about processes that does not give flexibility to creativity. So I think those are things which need much more elaboration. We can probably discuss it separately.
Okay, the third question, please.
My question to Dr. Venu and to Mr. Bose. We all know that both art and literature can actually help people to bring into perspective at the time of a disaster and help them to actually transcend that particular disaster. And also sometimes physically even help to bring it always into focus and also help to move forward like this Tekuti is actually representing. And also second point is that it can also bring into focus what are the real issues that must be addressed. So during the curating of the current Kochi Biennale as well as in the new museums, has this thought also gone into?
My answer to that is it informs every action that we take. In the museums which we are trying to recreate, this is very important. We try to look at the lessons learned, number one. Number two, we look at the context. The local context is very important. We should not forget the local context because each place has experienced disaster in a different way. So I think these are important lessons that we keep in mind when we look at further future museums.
My question is to Bose because I am a fan of his work. Actually, all the panel has agreed in one point where art is a libertarian way of creating wealth and value. So Bose has been a very maestro in creating value to art, which is very abstract, and we appreciate that.
Let's come to the question, please. Yes. We don't have much time.
Yes, sir. So how we can use auction as a device to see the value of rebuilding, Kerala rebuilding? Yeah. Is there any possibility in watching that way?
No, what was great about that auction is the kind of solidarity I could find, in one day, usually an auction takes place, you have to work for at least 1.5, 2 years to set it up a real auction. And secondly, this was happened in Kochi, first time an auction happening in Kochi, so many people didn't know how to bid it, how to bid an artwork, so some of them missed out. So it's a beginning, and I'm sure it's given confidence to artists, like in one day, 38 artists committed to the to be part of the auction. So that kind of solidarity, rebuilding Kerala, for that, I think that was an amazing gesture from Anish Kapoor onwards to our Sujit. I can say something like that. And, even if it is a small amount, I would say that, we are looking at 4 billion or something. Out of that, 3.2 crore is not a big amount. But still artists could bring that kind of
now, before we close,
Thanks.
Dr. Raman would like to add a couple of words.
No, I mean, it's a response to the first question, in fact. Sorry, I missed that opportunity. The point is to look at the longevity of the piece of art, I mean, that has nothing to do with the finance, as you have rightly pointed out. It's not market driven, I mean, in that sense. So, for instance, this Bhattacharya's, the Bengal famine series, those paintings are still valuable, I mean, or rather it has got its own place in National Museum. So I would say that this is to be valued differently. And I would obviously agree with you that this cannot directly be connected with wealth or money or finance.
Thank you very much. It's been a wonderful session. And we are really sorry that we can't take any more questions because the next session is about to start. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Since we are running out of time, we are winding up the session. Thank you so much for the questions.